Good afternoon, and welcome to My World Science, where we discuss everything scientific in our lives. Knowledge is power, and we hope to inspire you to use scientific knowledge to make your life and the world around you a better place. As of October 22, 2019, the CDC reports over 1,600 cases of vaping product use associated lung injury, or EVALI for short, with 34 deaths. What is causing this outbreak? What is it about vaping that makes it so different than its deadly cousin, cigarettes? Help us shed some light on the vaping epidemic. Today, we welcome to our show Dr. Jamil Momand. Dr. Momand is the chair of the chemistry and biochemistry departments at Cal State Los Angeles, where he runs a laboratory that investigates how protein activities impact cancerous tumors. A graduate of UCLA in biochemistry, Dr. Momand went on to earn a PhD in biochemistry from UCLA before completing his postdoctoral fellowship in molecular biology at Princeton University. In addition to a distinguished teaching career in chemistry, biochemistry, and bioinformatics courses, Dr. Momand has been deeply involved in various areas of research of cancer cells. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Momand to our show.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Momand.
Thank you.
I would like to start off with your background. What brought you into science, and why are you here today?
I've always been curious in the way natural things happen, and had that curiosity from a very young age. And that deepened when I got to college, actually. I was a chemistry major, and I also enjoyed biology. But I felt that there'd be a lot of great activity in the future with the combination of both biology and chemistry. So I decided to combine the two into biochemistry.
Yeah, of course, chemistry is so essential to learning about how life works. So I heard that you, of course, run a laboratory. What is it? What are you doing in that laboratory?
So my laboratory at Cal State Los Angeles is investigating the mechanisms of chemoresistance in breast cancer. So breast cancer, as you're probably aware of, is a major killer of women. It's the most highly diagnosed cancer for women worldwide.
Wow.
And a big problem is the resistance to therapies. And one of the therapies that's out there is called Herceptin. And women that are on Herceptin oftentimes get resistant to it, and we're trying to understand the molecular mechanisms for that resistance.
Wow. So not only can bacteria get resistant to antibiotics, but cancer gets resistant to chemo?
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah, so with the increased government regulations on the tobacco industry, they've now had another strategy, and that is to go into vaping as a way to kind of sidetrack regular smoking. And they've couched this as a way to get smokers that are currently hooked on cigarettes to get them to another alternative. But the biggest problem, of course, is that teenagers are starting to get into e-vaping. And it's predicted that out of those folks that are below 29, probably about 500,000 new cigarette smokers will come out of the e-vaping epidemic, because they will graduate from e-vaping to smoking.
A sick kind of graduation.
Right.
But graduation nonetheless.
Right. So that's a big epidemic that's going to be here in the future.
Why is it, do you think, that they would graduate to regular cigarettes from vaping, which I feel like I guess they would want to keep it for being cool, but regular cigarettes, I mean, do you have any idea of why they would want to go there?
Yeah, so I think a certain percentage will just stay on the e-cigarettes, and but I think it's the nicotine
Yes.
that is within the e-cigarettes which is going to cause addiction. And it's quite natural for a certain percentage of any population to want to try the regular cigarettes after that. And the problem with regular cigarettes, of course, is we know that at least out of those 500,000, about 170,000 of them will die out of smoking-related deaths.
Wow. That is too high of a percentage.
Yeah.
Anyway, you brought us some images today. Uh-oh. Oh. It wasn't going forward. There we go.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so the previous image was just showing, the type of vaping products that are out there. A lot of them were made to look like cigarettes. A lot of them kind of look fun. They have kind of beautiful structures to them.
That's right.
And they can attract regular smokers, but it can attract young people. And this is the insidious part of the whole industry, is the way it's being marketed to young people. And we all know the tricks that's happening.
Like their advertisements, I know, the beginning of the advertisement says not suitable for children.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, teenagers are going to want to listen to something that they're supposed to not listen to out of curiosity and a little bit of rebellion.
Right.
And the tobacco industry knows this. I mean, they have so much research on their own stuff, and they keep it from us. What I kind of find amusing with the different models, I guess, is how some of them do look like cigarettes, some of them look like cigars and pipes, and then some look like whistles.
Yes.
Look like whistles.
Yeah.
And of course, we have the most popular one that we all know of, the Juul, the one that looks like a flash drive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they say that the flash drive design was to intend so that smokers wouldn't feel like they're smoking a cigarette, but that's bull.
Right.
That's bull, and they know it.
Right, right. So I want to talk a little bit about this article that just came out this month, actually, that talks about the long-term effects of e-cigarettes. We've had very little data because of the newness of the entire industry.
Right.
That this is one of the first studies that has actually shown some long-term effects of having e-cigarettes. So what they did is they took mice and they had them exposed to e-cigarette vapor 5 days a week, 4 hours a day, for about a year. And they found that there was a higher incidence of lung adenocarcinomas as well as bladder-type cancers as well. And they actually took out the organs and did some analysis, and both at the cellular level and also at the gross anatomy level. And it's very clear that these mice are actually getting cancer.
And they weren't even actually inhaling the machine that was making it, right?
They were just around the vapor.
It was just the secondhand
Yeah.
smoke of vaping.
Right, right. So this is an incredibly important study because it really solidifies, I think, in my mind, some of the first studies to demonstrate that these e-cigarettes are not harmless.
Right. And one, of course, downside of studies is that it takes time to do them. So in the time, while we're doing studies currently, people have to just be preventative until we get data. But of course, in the time that we don't have data, people are also just going to roam free and do whatever they want.
Right, right. So I just want to tell our audience members, please pay attention to studies like these because I think it portends a major health issue for the world in terms of lung diseases in the future.
Yes, and of course, one of the biggest issues with lung cancer is that it has such a high kill percentage, and correct me if I'm wrong, because people don't really discover that it exists until a later stage in its development. Is that correct?
So oftentimes you're correct, Noah, that the lung cancer isn't depicted until much later, and by that time it's too late. I oftentimes cite a story of a friend of mine that was not a smoker, just coughed up blood one day,
Wow.
and she was taking excellent care of herself, but she found out that she had stage 4 lung cancer. And within about a year and a half, she succumbed to the disease. And I'm not sure if it's due to maybe secondhand smoke or just the way in which sometimes mutations occur within the DNA. But, I mean, it just tells you that you can never predict whether or not you're going to have a treatable form of the lung cancer.
Right.
So, you know, try to preserve your lungs as much as possible.
Yes.
That would be my advice to young people.
What are some of the intracellular mechanisms for preventing cancer?
Yeah, so we actually naturally have DNA repair systems within our cells that will repair damage to the DNA. And those systems help us to live as long as we do. However, in cancer and you know, e-cigarettes or regular cigarettes, there are carcinogens that actually make the mutations in the DNA and sometimes in those repair systems themselves.
That's
So when it's in the repair system itself, then that will actually cause those cells to start to divide, and they are unable to repair their DNA.
right.
And they divide uncontrollably. So it is a mutation process that occurs.
Let's see, the next image here. Yes, of course. Nicotine.
Yeah, so I put this slide here because you know, nicotine is in e-cigarettes. It's also in regular cigarettes, and it is the cause for the addiction. Okay, and you know, as early as 10 seconds after a first puff, you know, nicotine is actually in the brain.
That is really fast.
Yeah, and also nicotine is found in every tissue of the body, including breast milk, and even for pregnant women, it can cause the fetus
Whoa.
to be hooked on nicotine
Hooked
at an
while
early age.
pregnant. That's
Yeah.
one more reason not to do any kind of drugs.
Right. So nicotine is probably the causative agent in the e-cigarettes, which is actually causing cancer in these mice as well.
Wow.
So in cigarettes, you have nicotine as well as tar and other what we call oxidation products, products that are combined with oxygen. But in the e-cigarettes, it is probably the nicotine itself which is causing the
Nicotine
cancer.
itself. Wow. I know that you're doing some research, and what do you think what could be the future prevention measures for cancer? Could cancer become just as dealable as infectious diseases are now?
So let's talk a little bit about cancer. Cancer has just surpassed heart disease as the major killer in the United States. And I think part of that is due to the fact that we have better treatments for heart disease.
Okay, that's good.
And people are living a little bit longer. And in terms of preventing cancers, there's a couple ways that one can do it. There's a component of cancers which is caused by viruses. So if you can get vaccinated for HPV and hepatitis B and hepatitis C, that would be one good way of preventing cancer in the future. Another way is to be very, very careful about what you breathe in. That's going to be your lung tissue is going to be exposed to lots of molecules in the air. Some of them are going to be cancerous. If you can make that air that you breathe in as pristine as possible, that would be one good way of preventing cancer as well. Also, don't expose yourself to UV radiation.
Of course.
So that would be the sunlight, and so that's another thing. And of course, your diet. Make sure you eat foods that don't have pesticides or carcinogens in them.
Yes.
So these are the ways that one can probably at least delay a cancer as long as possible.
Right.
I have to say that there are some ways that we cannot prevent cancers, and that's through endogenous systems that actually will cause mutations in our DNA.
Oh.
But in terms of those that are exogenous, like I just talked about, we should be able to do our best to prevent it.
Yeah. Let's see, there's another one, I believe. Right, e-cigarettes, described by the American Association for Cancer Research.
Right, so the AACR is an organization that I belong to, the American Association for Cancer Research. And obviously they're very interested in preventing cancers as well. And and informing young people about the potential hazards of cancer. And so here, what this list is saying is that these e-cigarettes, it's a little bit too early to tell, but for sure they contain nicotine, and nicotine should be avoided at all costs.
Right. Just how bad is it to be around? I mean, I know the mice study showed that it was purely secondhand smoke that was causing cancer.
Right.
How bad is it, of course, to also just be around these people who vape and who also do cigarettes?
Yeah, so you can imagine that you are going to be breathing in the same things that they're exhaling, and a lot of the carcinogens that the first-hand smokers are taking in, they're going to be breathed out, most of that. But if you're in the vicinity, you can take that in, and those molecules can kill you or cause a health hazard just as much as the first-hand people can if you're around it. So. It's all about the molecules that get into your lung cells and basically damage your genome. That's really it. And if you can prevent that as much as possible, you'd want to do that. I understand that there's a certain attractiveness to the whole enterprise among young people. Maybe it's a nervous habit, maybe they're influenced by friends, but I think 20, 30, 40 years from now, I'd hate to say that a certain percentage of those students will have lung issues. That's going to be a guaranteed. There's no getting around it. Might some people be lucky to avoid it? Yes, some people will be lucky enough to avoid it, just like you have some lifetime smokers that somehow don't get cancer. But you're playing Russian roulette with a semi-loaded gun. And I can't emphasize enough to young people, how try to keep your lungs as pristine as possible.
I know this doesn't exactly correlate, but would it be worse to be around or smoke than it is to have what is now considered a healthy diet? It's
important to have a diet that's fairly controversial. There are some known carcinogens in foods that any respectable government is monitoring to make sure it doesn't get into our food. So I think that we're trying as much as we can. There are some countries where it's less regulated.
Right.
And you do have some problems. So I talked a little bit. I talked a little bit to my students about aflatoxin. Aflatoxin is a carcinogen that comes from a fungus that's found in peanuts actually, and in less regulated situations, you could actually ingest that. And aflatoxin is a known what we call intercalator. So it's a flat molecule that will reside between the base pairs of the DNA and actually cause changes to the DNA and cause mutations. Those mutations eventually can eventually lead to cancer. And so it's all about keeping our genomes as pristine as possible. And that would be my advice. Yeah.
I guess the main reason that I brought up like diet versus smoking is because I kind of wanted to say that if smoking is worse than having a bad diet, which I'm going to be confident and say that it is, it means that people who want to have vegetarian diets, vegan diets, or Mediterranean diets, whatever diet they think is going to help them, well then they'd be a hypocrite if they were to be around friends or people or themselves who smoke or vape.
Oh, how interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, I would consider, just from my reading of the literature, the vast literature in cancer and cancer prevention, that it's much worse to be around people that have secondhand smoke or smoke themselves and have what would be considered a good diet, rather than to have a good diet, well, have a fairly poor diet and then start smoking. So I think smoking just doesn't compare.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been proven time and time again to be a cause of many types of lung diseases, including lung cancer.
I think at this point I've realized that we've been slamming smokers a lot, but now I think it's important that we talk about ways that these smokers can get help. Because certainly there's smokers out there who don't actually really want to be smoking, but nicotine is a powerful chemical, and we should probably discuss ways that those people can get resources to help them.
Yeah, I think there are psychological areas around that, or websites there that you can actually go into and find the links to and get professional help. And it's going to be just like any kind of other addiction, and it's going to have to be partly willpower and partly getting the right counseling to remove yourself from that situation. I've known people that said one day they decided to they decided to stop smoking, and they were able to go cold turkey from that time on.
Wow.
And that takes an incredible amount of willpower for those people, but there are others that have to go through a staged process. But I think we have to worry about this idea of using e-cigarettes as a way to get off, because I think that they can be just as addictive, and as the study that I showed before indicates, they can also cause cancer.
Exactly.
So you're not safe by going to e-cigarettes.
One thing that came to my mind is actually the various nicotine supplements and nicotine-like gums that are over the counter. What's the term? You don't need a prescription for them. How good are those? Yeah,
so I haven't done a complete study of those, to be honest, and so I'm going to say that that might be a stepping stone to get away from cigarettes, as long as it's only a stepping stone. Yes. There are cancers of the mouth that one can get, and I don't know the literature on the way that nicotine gum could possibly cause those kinds of things. I do know that chewing tobacco, for sure, causes mouth cancers and that kind of stuff, and tongue cancers as well, throat cancer. But I'm not sure about these other products.
Right.
Right.
The bottom line here, I suppose, is don't start smoking, don't start vaping if you are not, and if you are, do whatever you can to stop it, and get away from people who do, because you are impacting your health, you are impacting the years that you have to live. And if you're on your deathbed at 60 and someone tells you, hey, you could have another 10 years to live if you didn't do this in your life, how are you going to feel? We were very lucky to have Dr. Momand take time out of his busy schedule to come and visit us. Thank you very much for joining us. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter or Instagram @MyWorldScience. Think inquisitively.